trusted you. Nor would I have ever imagined in our darkest time that you would be the one to save us. The spirits have granted me clarity, a vision. They whisper a name. Many will not understand.
They will come for us now. All of them!
But you must step out of the shadows and lead.
It's been 2 years since Vol'jin's dying breath made Sylvanas Windrunner Warchief of the Horde. If people were skeptical of the Shadowhunter's choice and successors before, they certainly are now. With Battle for Azeroth fresh off the boat, players have to come to terms with a Warchief who's slaughtered hundreds of Night Elves, torched a world tree to the ground, and launched Azeroth's greatest superpowers in a full-scale global war. Having been promised a story of ethical dilemmas and morally gray conflict, people are more than a little peeved by what seems to be yet another tale of good versus evil. Goody Two-Shoes, Pretty Boy, and his dog lead the just in slaying the big bad witch of the West. After all, there's really no way to justify this, right? Right? Listen, Blizzard did deliver on the morally gray expansion they promised, but apparently a lot of you need to be spoon-fed your story. So let's talk about why Sylvanas' actions throughout War of Thorns and up to this point have been fairly sensible, breaking into morally questionable at worst and morally righteous at best. To kick things off, we have to understand what it means to be Warchief of the Horde. Sylvanas has a moral responsibility to each member race in her purview, to guarantee their well-being and continued prosperity. As such, any action to that end can reasonably be called moral, at least from a Horde perspective. That being the case, we have our metric by which to judge Sylvanas' actions. The question follows then, in burning down Teldrassil and igniting conflict with the Alliance, is Sylvanas working to guarantee the well-being and continued prosperity of the Horde? Is she doing what's best for her people? Absolutely.
Close ranks! Advance has won! Lordaeron will be ours!
My king, we have her cornered.
One of, if not the biggest threats to the Horde is the Alliance, always has been. Especially now that other major players like the Scourge and the Burning Legion are out of the picture, the Alliance is the only real force capable of threatening Horde livelihood. But wait a minute, so what? The Alliance would never actually do anything, right? After all, our boy Anduin is the Pope of Peace and Kumbayas. I wouldn't be so sure. In fact, when you take a look at Azeroth's history, a much darker picture is painted.
There will be no glory today. Only pain.
See, many of the races are part of the Horde specifically because of Alliance actions in the past. Take the Sin'dorei, for example. Exiled by their own people on account of their arcane addiction, a disease largely out of their control, the Blood Elves eventually turned to the Alliance for a cure. And how did they respond? By sending the Blood Elf armies on suicide missions, by making them the expendable vanguard. And it was the Night Elves, now one of the Alliance's most influential and conservative members, that exiled their afflicted brethren in the first place. The Forsaken, too, are some of the most hated and distrusted in all of Azeroth, rejected by their former kinsmen, despite many of them being Alliance citizens and soldiers in life. Sure, they look a little spooky, but there's a heart of gold in there. Or the Orcs, many of whom were enslaved by humans following years of conflict, some of them living their entire lives in internment camps. These are Azeroth's rejects, her outcast and her feared. They're a part of the Horde because no one else would accept them. You can't expect the Alliance to treat the Horde with the kind of decency and humanity it markets itself as embodying, because to the Alliance, the races of the Horde aren't people. These are savages, monsters, and spilled blood and love lost aside, the world would be a better place without them.
The Horde! It's all we have!
Still think peace was ever an option? Just look at Drums of War back in patch 1.12, or the fallout from the Wrathgate, spurred on by people like Varian and Garrosh, or even the conflict immediately following the Broken Shore. Every time the Horde and Alliance reach across the Isle, every single time they band together to defeat a common enemy, their peace eventually devolves into conflict. That being the case, why should Sylvanas expect anything different? Sure, Anduin may preach peace, but how can she possibly trust him? Even if he is genuine, how can she be sure that he can rein in the whole of the Alliance? Ashinar is a perfect example of how even in times of truce, open warfare still occurs, despite the best intentions of faction leaders. When Sylvanas says,
"Ours is a cycle of hatred. Alliances forged and broken. We have paid the price for sharing this world. And we have forgotten what makes us strong."
she's not wrong. The next war with the Alliance was only ever a question of when. We can even evaluate this situation via game theory, and it highlights Sylvanas' perspective. Just look at the prisoner's dilemma. You're asking Sylvanas to choose to cooperate and hope that Anduin, and all the kings that come after him, and all the war chiefs that come after her, don't defect. If that wasn't asking enough, past iterations of the game have resulted in one or both sides defecting.
Only one of us wanted this war.
You call for peace when it suits you, little lion. But you're quick enough to kill.
Now look, I know what you're thinking. If the Horde and Alliance have always been at war, what's the big deal? Par for the course, am I right? Wrong. You couldn't be more wrong. See, Sylvanas has to consider another factor, something no warchief before her ever had to deal with. Something that's sure to make this war and every war after much, much different.
What is this?
This will change everything.
Azerite. Fallout from Sargeras mortally wounding the Titan Soul, Azerite can be incredibly destructive. The goblins have only had their hands on it for like a few months at best, and have already incorporated it into war machines that can single-handedly take on an army. Given enough time, Azerite could be the catalyst for a true weapon of mass destruction, on par with nuclear weapons, if not worse. That being the case, war with the Alliance in a post-Azerite world could very well mean the end of one, if not both factions. All it takes is one misunderstanding, like what happened at the Wrathgate or the Broken Shore, and Kalimdor's burning in Azerite hellfire. It's no surprise either that Sylvanas isn't one to wait for the fighting to start. Remember that she tried that once and paid dearly for it.
Windrunner, you were defender of your people. Do you not remember?
I remember. A fool.
Back when she was Ranger General of Silvermoon, the elves had grown complacent in their peacetime. Instead of confronting the Scourge, they waited, hiding behind their magical wards. When the enemy fell upon their doorstep, all the walls in the world proved to provide little more than false hope. Sylvanas paid the price of their arrogance. She lost her home, her people, her freedom, even her own soul. She would not repeat the mistake of her forefathers.
Life is pain.
The enemy will always come for you.
Hope fails.
Peace is the illusion of safety.
Now you understand.
That this is the only way forward. If conflict with the Alliance is inevitable, the best thing Sylvanas can do for her people is end the opposition before the cost of fighting becomes too high. When she put Teldrassil to the torch, she started a war, but I don't really see it that way. In my eyes, Sylvanas is working to end a war before it begins. A war so unimaginably destructive, there's no one left to pick up the pieces. Ironically enough, Sylvanas wasn't even the first person to have these realizations. Even before the discovery of Azeroth, there was someone else who concluded that total war was the only option, that the costs of chasing peace were too high, that the cycle must be broken.
Those blood-soaked shores of Kalimdor, where sailors fought and died, the Admiral fell at Theramore because she left his side.
It's not surprising that Jaina got her own Warbringers short. She's the Alliance version of Sylvanas. When Garrosh obliterated Theramore, Jaina was shattered, punished for her naivety. Even now, she's haunted by her past actions in pursuit of a harmony that proved little more than a false hope.
But when he faced those savage foes, his daughter stood aside.
Facing the consequences of those actions, owning up to that guilt and making things right is a central plot point in the Kul Tira's campaign. Her redemption lies in the death of the Horde. If you still want someone to blame, if you're still looking for someone to throw moral shade at, look no further than Varrock Saurfang. Everyone's favorite battle-scarred veteran is a paragon of honor and virtue, which is exactly why he's one of the worst defenders in this expansion. In attempting to crush the Alliance once and for all, breaking the morale of their forces in Kalimdor was critical. Sylvanas hoped that taking down the Kaldorai's greatest heroes would accomplish this. Malfurion's Stormrage had to die, and Tyrande Whisperwind would be captured in the Horde occupation of Darnassus. Our boy Saurfang blew those plans to hell though, when he spared Malfurion and then warned Tyrande of the impending Horde occupation, all in the name of honor. Their heroes still breathing, Sylvanas had failed to break the Night Elves.
You can kill us, but you cannot kill hope.
Forcing her to improvise.
Can't I? Burn it! Burn it!
Sylvanas wanted to rip the band-aid off quickly and be done with it. But by hindering his Warchief's efforts, Saurfang is prolonging the bloodshed for both sides. This is what Sylvanas means when she asks that honor horrors like Varrock and Bane focus on the living.
You abandoned Saurfang to die out there!
It is the death he wanted. If that troubles you, you're free to join him. Or you can tend to the living. The choice is yours.
Saurfang is putting his personal feelings, his obsession with honor, over the lives of his brethren, a sentiment echoed in the Old Soldier cinematic. So, is Sylvanas evil? Maybe, but putting survival first, refusing to lie in wait for the end, taking the fight to the enemy before they can come for you, doing everything in your power to guarantee the well-being of those with nowhere else to turn to, the exiled, the hated, and the oppressed, that is what makes us strong. If that's evil, then count me in.
For